Hi everyone, I'm your host, Lee-Davies. I'm a filmmaker, entrepreneur, conservationist, and impact investor. And welcome to our Future Nature podcast. We aim to empower you with the insights and knowledge to navigate the increasingly complex landscape of tomorrow. So brace yourselves as we go on an exhilarating podcast adventure and dive deep into what it truly means to be human in the 21st century. We'll explore the critical issues of climate change, artificial intelligence, biohacking, and longevity, as well as other emerging threats to humanity. And we'll be interviewing the leading change makers, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs from around the world. Welcome to Our Future Nature. Let's get on with today's episode. Hi everyone and welcome to Our Future Nature. Today I'm super honored to have Jorge Perez, who is an author, agent, producer, and keynote speaker. He's been in personal development and the entertainment industry for over 20 years, and he's the host of Outliers TV podcast and has created TV shows for Bravo as well. The Shut the Fuck Up method is a transformative approach that emphasizes the power of silence and self-reflection to radically improve one's life. Super stoked to have Jorge here to chat about his book, which apparently, Jorge, is doing super well. Tell me about how the book's being received.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. So glad to be with you today. So the book's been #1 on Amazon for personal development for the last 3 weeks since it came out. So it's been really amazing.
Okay, and it's quite a punchy title, so I'm sure that's part of the reason why it's successful. There's also a book called How to Not Give a Fuck About Anything or something similar like that. Is that what inspired you to call this book Shut the Fuck Up?
You know what actually inspired me to call it that is that, I've been in the personal development space for like 20 years, and it wasn't until the last kind of retreats that I started taking under Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's one of my greatest mentors. And I kept observing how people were just complaining still and doing all these retreats, and whether it was participants and staff, it was like, you're hearing the man talk about quantum physics and how we perpetuate our energy when we talk about things that we don't want. And then people turn around and be like, oh, I hate this food. And I'm like, it hit me. I'm like, you know what? If I ever write a spiritual book, it's going to be called Shut the Fuck Up. And that was the genesis purpose.
There's a lot of spiritual narcissism going on. People who think they're being, they do a bit of yoga, a bit of meditation, and then they're complaining about really sort of trivial things, shall we say. So why Joe Dispenza? Why is he such a mentor to you? What is it in particular about him that's inspired you?
Sean, I feel, I've studied under, Tony Robbins, Byron Katie, Abraham Hicks, truly all the great ones. But it really was Dr. Joe who was almost like it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, in a way of when I finally learned the science behind how you really have to almost like summon willpower. Just like if you're in a diet or you're in a fast, and you could know all the food to eat and you could go on a boot camp retreat and do all the exercises. But if you come back home on Monday morning and you're eating pizza and pasta, then it doesn't matter how many retreats you do, So you have to bring into your own spirituality that kind of rigor, that willpower to really rewire how you speak. And honestly, I don't blame anybody for people talk the way they talk, right? And I really do think it's all subconscious. Why we came wired like that, and we're also culturally incentivized to complain. We form friendships and we create relatedness when we complain about things, when we complain about the weather, when we complain about our neighbors, our husbands, our wives. So we're constantly incentivized to be the way that we are, a complaining way. So my method is to actually put a stop to it, like literally shut your mouth and then watch the incredible rabbit hole that you go through to really transform who you are.
So this method, you're saying that people can follow this method and it should amplify their transformation, or will it give them, these are the first steps that they should take? Like, how far down their wellness journey do they have to be to employ this method, or is this really for beginners?
The beauty about the method is that I'm bringing you in from training wheels and all the way to the Black Diamond skiing slopes PhD. Okay, because it really is. I give you hacks. So I make it really simple. I have the 10 shut the fuck up commandments, right? And like the first one is, thou shalt not talk shit about anyone. And if you will, thou shalt use my friend instead of the person's name. So right away, I'm giving you the importance of anonymity. Like we go around assassinating people's characters without truly noticing the impact that it has in our community with our friends. So I start you, like I said, in training wheels, but I take you really deep into, you start seeing how you just start attracting different things. And I'm telling you, all I ask for people is to try this for 1 week, man. 1 week, and you're going to see miracles happening in your life. So we go from beginning all the way to PhD level. This is the proudest thing I've ever done in my life, because I purposely, what it is like, I love Buddhism. I love Eastern philosophies. I love Dr. Joe, who's very scientific, but I'm like, okay, so how do I bring in people that don't read spirituality books, don't read self-help books? Like I bring you examples from like you and your best friend at work bitching about your boss to how that connects to quantum physics and the Big Bang. Like I take you conceptual, and I take you all the way back to, you're watching homelessness, you're redoing your house. Like, and I know for a fact that with the metaphors and analogies that I create in the book, people get it 100%.
Our Future Nature is brought to you today by Authentic Gallery. Authentic Gallery makes buying and collecting stunning and impactful art easy, with a high percentage of proceeds going towards our vetted partner charities. If you want to buy art and contribute to an impactful cause, well, check out Authentic Gallery. That's spelled AWETHENTIC gallery.com. As a special treat to my listeners, you can use the discount code OFNPOD. That's OFNPOD to get a 10% discount off all of my limited edition prints. So check out Authentic Gallery and start browsing now. Thanks very much. It sort of taps into this idea that everything is frequency and energy. So your words are frequency, and low-level words or gossip kind of bring your level of consciousness to a lower level. And then there's the role of epigenetics in all this. So what are some of the takeaways from learning about epigenetics, and how does that come into this?
Studies show, and you can find this not through just Dr. Joe's work, but Lipton, all the great ones, that we're living 70% of our lives in fight or flight. Okay, so that means that it's not sustainable for the human body to live in a state of stress, of alert. Fight or flight, nothing wrong with fight. Fight or flight is great when there's a dinosaur chasing you and you're running and your brain goes in high beta, your immune system goes down, boom. But the way we're living on fight or flight these days, it's almost like you're in LA and you're driving 3 hours to Las Vegas on gear number 2. It's just not sustainable. Your body is going to burn out. And that's what we're seeing, obviously, the epidemic of whether it's cancer or neurological diseases like ALS, MS, Parkinson's. Those are all diseases that studies are showing that they get detonated by something that happened emotionally. And I've talked to so many people that have ALS currently and MS, and weirdly enough, Sean, they remember something emotional that happened that almost like detonated that disease. So my whole intention, the book is very inspired by both of my parents passed away from cancer. My dad in 2019 from leukemia. I was a stem cell donor, and my mom in 2022 from a breast cancer that metastasized to her brain. And after really taking a deep No, thank you, man. After taking a deep dive on what could have happened, obviously genetically, I want to know, right? Me, my sister, who, the love of my life. So what I realized is that my dad lived in way too much anger about what happened in Venezuela, his native country, how the economy collapsed, the whole thing collapsed. And my mom never really got over her trauma from the divorce. And they very innocently kept knocking on the door of fight or flight and lived there for such a long time. And eventually their immune systems gave in. So the book is just a series of hacks and very common sense on giving you data, right? On like, listen, we can't live that way anymore. And to truly show the reader that we are very innocently overstressing ourselves out on things that don't have to be that deep, And I talk a lot about mortality. I talk about how, listen, we got to embrace that we're just passing by, man. I mean, our Eastern philosophy, I think, has a much healthier relationship with death than in the Western cultures, where we just we don't want to talk about it. And unless we truly embrace that we're just passing by, then we're not going to really enjoy this thing. And we're going to make all these little things seem so big when in the larger scheme, they don't mean anything.
So you would recommend this book to people whose family have some sort of history of disease or going through some sort of degenerative disease, and you think these methods can actually help people who have illnesses such as cancer?
The study of epigenetics is how we metabolize stress, right? How we metabolize the environment, whether it's outside or inside. When we trigger genetic diseases are because of that constant fight or flight, overstress states detonate our genetic predispositions. That's what the science is saying now. So it's like as a caution, right? How can we not go into those high states of stress, of fight or flight, of high beta so constantly, so we're not knocking on those genetic doors, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So do I recommend this? I mean, listen, no one makes it out of here alive, right? So my book is not a deep dive into it's almost like in a very lighthearted but very common sense in your face way. I'm giving you the tools to just enjoy life more, and to really not be in the future so much, and then to really enjoy this moment and have a much more peaceful life.
And it's shown in all the science that stress and long-term stress is really one of the biggest causes of degenerative disease. It's one of the biggest killers, if you like. Why do you think society, especially Western society, is so stressed out?
Technology, everything. We're moving faster than ever, right? What is the biggest intention of technology? To be able to do more for a lot less time and to improve efficiency, right, and productivity. So imagine we're doing so much more, and because we're doing so much more, we can be on our phones, we can be watching TV, we could be doing all these things, right? So imagine this body that we have is completely on high alert constantly, right? So I think that as a let's call it pros and cons, right? The pros of technology is like all these things are getting done, right? We're enjoying the pleasures of like pressing a button and things just come out of nowhere. But the con is that we are living 70% of our lives in fight or flight. So what we have to do is we have to do something to counterbalance all that stress, all that activity, all those games. It's like playing video. Imagine, like, no one just drives anymore. You're driving, you're listening to a podcast, you're looking at your text. Pretty soon we're going to have glasses. You know what I mean? Like, we just have to do something to counteract that kind of action that we're having. It's stimulation. Well, the stimulation is just way too high. So in the book, and I really am a stickler about this, we need to incorporate some sort of meditation practice, because meditation is what really balances out the parasympathetic system and doesn't let the sympathetic system run the show, which is the high stressful one, right? Nothing wrong with parasympathetic and sympathetic, but they have to be more aligned. Right now, the sympathetic one, which is the high stress one, it's kind of winning the battle, if you will.
Yeah. HRV, which is heart rate variability, has become a very fashionable term and acronym thrown around. Do you measure your HRV to help you regulate your parasympathetic or vagal nervous system?
My big thing is meditation, right? And my big thing is like, whenever I find myself really stressed out, and by the way, this is a hack that I always use. When you're feeling really stressed and you want to kick in your parasympathetic right away, touch your heart. The minute you touch your heart, everything starts to calm down. Here's another one for you. You know how when you see a baby or you see a cute dog and you go, oh, you know that noise? The more that you actually go, oh, throughout your day, the more that you're kicking your parasympathetic system again. So I don't get too gadgety, Sean, but I would love you to educate me on the different technologies to actually measure that. I mean, everybody's freaking wearing that ring. What the Nuvo, what's the ring called?
The Aura ring.
The Aura ring. Like, God, if I see one more Aura ring, but I'm not. What I am a stickler to, and I talk about it in the book, is I created the GAF, right? So GAF is gratitude, affirmation, and visualization. I'm such a fanatic on the first thing that you do when you wake up, which is your brain is on theta. Your brain is like, when you wake up in the morning, you're like half between like the two worlds, you're half awake, half asleep. That's when you literally grab your journal right next to your bed and you write 5 things that you're grateful for, 5 things that you want to affirm, and anything that you're visualizing. And after you write those things, you put it away, and then you do your 10 5, 10 minute, 15-minute visual meditation. And that way, man, you're like coding your day with a balanced nervous system, and you're not letting, whether it's the traffic, whether it's your mother-in-law or your boss, get the best out of you. So that is something that I talk about it in the book. And I also do it right before bed as well. When your brain's about to go on theta, you're about to go to sleep, do not watch the news right when you wake up and right before bed. That's when your subconscious mind is like just a sponge. So that's as techie as I get, but I'm willing to get more.
I mean, simple little hacks there, but very effective. And the worst thing that people can do is look at their phones before going to bed. I totally agree with that. So apart from meditation, are there any other exercises that you do to keep your stress down, or any other hacks or dietary amendments? You know, what other things? How do you look at diet? How do you look at sleep? Anything to improve those?
Other than really my meditation practice, which at the minimum I'll do 15 minutes a day, but sometimes I'll go an hour, right? I do guided meditations. I love Dr. Joe's guided meditations, which he has either for, balancing your energy centers, or that's my big thing that I do. I indulge in content that I feel brings me peace. I don't watch the news, and if you do, I just want you to know something, that the news is it's a business, and our very primal survival mechanism, fight or flight, is constantly look at bad news, right? Why? Because it figures that very innocently that if it knows where there's problems, then we're going to keep ourselves safe, right? That's why you look at ratings, and when you look at CNN or Fox News, and most of the stuff they're showing is either war or murder or anything why? Because we instinctively look at those news because our system says if we know where there's trouble, then we're going to be safe. The irony is that guard dog vigilant system, fight or flight, is the same one that ends up killing us at the end because it keeps us stressed out. So I think that's like it's like such a mic drop thing to really take on. And I, like I said, I don't blame CNN or Fox News. They're a business too, and they see their ratings. And if I'm Toyota or Google and I'm spending money on you, CNN, I'm gonna go, wait, well, why is it 2 o'clock? Why did you have a spike on the 2 p.m. show on Wednesday? And you tell me, because we showed stuff about Gaza. And I'm like, great, keep those numbers up if you want me to keep advertising. So I want people to start learning and not demonizing things. It's just to understand that it's almost like empathy. We got to have empathy and be like, you know what? That CNN media guy, he has a family too, and a kid that goes to private school. So if we see it more like it's a business and not like they're trying to, stress us to death, then in my experience, I find it more not just tolerable, but understandable.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about why you created this book, and we've delved into the overall thrust of your theory here. But what are the quick sort of top commandments, or the quick sort of 10 commandments that you wrote about?
If you're going to talk about anybody, right, not favorably, don't use their name. Use my friend, right? I talk about gratitude is such a big important. Like, I don't care who you are. Look. The other day I took an Uber, and the Uber driver was this beautiful African man that was telling me how Uber was stealing from them, and they were paying more than they were taking more than half of his check, and like I thought to myself, how do I bring up shut the fuck up method and let him talk, right? Because also one of my commandments is generosity, right? We gotta, whether people are speaking negatively or not, like we gotta have generosity when we listen to people. So anyway, so we had a beautiful talk. The Uber driver, he asked me about where I was from, and I'm from Venezuela. I don't know if you know what's going on in Venezuela, but whenever I say I'm from Venezuela, people are like, oh, God, God bless you. And, Sean, that day I did something different. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to jump in this and talk about how shitty it is. So I just said, listen, my country of Venezuela is a beautiful country. I haven't been there in a while, but I hope I go back soon. And then he was like, what about the president? That guy that took over the whole thing? And I was like, he was a manifestation of something that was already going south. And only time will tell how it all made sense in hindsight 2020 why he was there. And the guy stayed quiet. He's like, well, what religion are you? And I'm like, well, I shut the fuck up. No, but the point of my story was like, no, and I even told him, I'm like, listen, millions of people would love to be in your shoes. I don't care who you are. Like, this is enough with the looking at what I don't have. Like, how about start looking at what you do have? And as we start putting energy behind that, then it's going to get bigger. This is the way I bring quantum physics is, in quantum physics, if I look at the atom and the electrons around it, right, that's in the quantum, it's living there. The moment that I look away, those electrons disappear. This is the same observer effect that we have, Sean. When we look at a situation, when we look at our neighbor and we say, dude, that guy's a dick. The minute we say that, we lock in those particles. So he has to keep appearing that way. So what I invite people is, if you don't like somebody that you meet, commit yourself to being wrong about that person. Because if you don't, you're going to end up proving yourself right. So I invite people to think it. You can think it all you want. This is not about repression. This is about mindfulness. But the minute I meet you, Sean, and I tell my friend Maria, Sean's kind of a dick, I'm done. It's toast. Now it's almost like we're that powerful that I start summoning all the powers of the universe to prove me right. And then I'll turn around and be like, see, I told you. And we're just constantly finding ourselves right about things that we don't want. I also, and one of the commandments too, is like, I encourage people to really be our brothers and sisters keepers about the experience that they have. For example, if you and me, Sean, have a friend, Maria, right? And Maria, I find that she's a little tight in the wallet with me, that she's cheap, right? I can have that dynamic with Maria, but the minute I tell you, Sean, you know what? Maria's freaking cheap. Boom, I just infected you with that. So now you're going to see it. And then you're going to turn to me and be like, you know what? You were right about Maria. When in reality, maybe you were never going to have the dynamic with her. Maybe your dynamic was fine. So it's like, how could I, since I love you, because you're my friend, how could I make sure that you don't have a bad experience? Just so what? So I can get a little like high five relatedness. So it's like nothing wrong with bonding with people and finding camaraderie and community. But are we really doing it at the expense of ruining experiences and assassinating people's characters? That's what I want people to really start thinking about.
And of course, in this social media saturated age, it's even harder to stay away from the gossip, from the hate online, and not to get caught up in it. How do you treat social media, and does that infect your process when you see, how do you stay out of that echo chamber, if you like?
Well, great question. So I actually talk about this in the book. I talk about gossip, right? It's another very survival-based conversation, because if we look at, if you're looking down on your Instagram and you're scrolling down and you find like there's a celebrity scandal, a celebrity cheated on their spouse, we don't take one beat and we stop, and we look at it, right? And but if you were scrolling through Instagram and the scandal is about you and a cheating scandal with your spouse, you would be destroyed. So I'm thinking, like, can you imagine, like, we're creating bonding over like the worst thing that could happen to people? And again, I say, I'm not saying I'm innocent from this phenomenon. I just want to inject some common sense to the conversation. You know what I mean? And what I think that's happening in my life, listen, it's so random, but so I'm going to tell you this. Yesterday, I was at the pool with my friend, and I was like, what's so crazy? I don't know if you follow up with, I've worked with Jennifer Lopez a bunch of times, and she's amazing, super professional. Like, I love her team. But, now you're hearing about, like, she's about to get divorced again, and she just got married like 3 weeks ago, basically. And I was telling my friend, it's so powerful, because we're looking at celebrities and we're thinking that we should be like them, right? And like, I want to look like her. I want to date who she's dating. I want that car. I want that house. But even so, you're noticing how it doesn't matter. Like, in a way, like, it almost seems like when we look at these celebrity figures that are just like acquiring, right? Like, you're just acquiring. Like, let me get the husband down. Let me get the car down. Now I'm in the Paris fashion show. There's a sense energetically where we're seeing that it's not enough. And that it'll never be enough. So I go lightly into it as well. And I think this has to do more with like the five senses, right? The smell, touch, feel, taste. Like here, everything, they saturate everything in us, and they make us think like, okay, no, once I have this, once I have that, then I'm going to be happy. But it doesn't work that way. We need to actually, and this is where the meditation practice comes in handy. When we meditate, we're killing the seduction of the five senses. Nothing wrong, by the way, with wanting cars and wanting wives and wanting all these things, but we're not coming to them like with the lie anymore. The veil's gone. We know that it's not like they're going to make us happier, but they don't have a grip on us anymore. And I think that's what's happened. That's what happens when you start reading this book. You start losing that killer seduction from the five senses.
Yeah, it's such an effective tool, meditation. When do you meditate usually? What's the most optimal time for you? And is there any particular technique that you use? For
me, first thing in the morning. And I choose to always do a gratitude meditation, because I feel like that's like killing two birds with one stone, because in my experience, gratitude is the highest state of receivership. When Sean, when we're marinating on and like when I take beats during the day to feel my breath and be like, man, can you believe that I can take all these breaths without pain? You know how many people would kill to be able to take a breath without pain? And here I am thinking that I'm missing a house or a car, when in reality I have this breath. I do a lot of work where I'm a caretaker with people with ALS, right, on these retreats. And these are guys like you and me, Sean, literally woke up one morning and were like, oh, my leg feels weird. And now they're in a wheelchair and like that. So it's like, obviously I'm very blessed in the sense that I've been able to really marinate it in perspective. But most of us are not, they're not thinking that way. And I used to be that way. You really have to, like, I don't care who you are or what you do or how much money you have in the bank or not. Like, you got to go feed the homeless a little bit. You got to go and like be around people that can't walk, because these people will tell you, I'll give you all the money that I have. I've met really wealthy people that have ALS or MS that are like, I'll give it all away just to be able to move my motor skills. So we're sitting here so blessed, and we're not even in the presence of it. And I want people to start getting into the presence of it. Yeah, being of service to others is probably one of the highest forms of meditation in a way. And it does bring you a sense of contentness that, we should all be doing more for others and being of service. So you mentioned you're a big fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza. There's a lot of talk about this quantum healing. We've interviewed Deepak Chopra on this podcast, and just wanted to kind of circle back to this concept of quantum healing and how it's important to tap into your spiritual body as well. Is there anything that you want to mention about that? Or I know you dip into quantum physics in your book. My perspective of quantum healing is just, it almost, to me, it's directly correlated to the science of faith. Okay, so I've experienced a lot of people through, in the retreats with Dr. Joe, people that were stage 4 cancer, oncologist tells them, hey, just go home and die. There's nothing for us to do, right? And all of a sudden they come and do this retreat and they spend all this time meditated, and then they just have like an instantaneous healing, right? Like tumors disappear, whatnot. And have you seen those? Have you seen those at his retreats? Have you seen it? Yeah. Wow. I have one girl that I worked with that literally her oncologist was like, there's nothing else to do. She started doing the retreats, and her markers started going down, and then tumors started disappearing. There's so many documented examples like this, but I really think this has to do with the person's belief system. Like, it's almost like, the example of the 4-minute mile. Like, no one was able to break a 4-minute mile running until one person first did it, and then everybody else started doing it. So when, the human mind, man, faith is so strong. When you believe something's possible, and you do the work for it, and you're, whether it's meditating or praying or just really making an effort of putting that magic into work, life changes, things heal, So I think in the quantum, if you start detoxifying how you speak, So my system is, there's like it's like a reverse engineer, right? So you have the belief, like life is hard, right? And then you have the thoughts, I'm bad with money, or whatever. And then the word comes out and goes, I suck with money, or I'm broke. So it's like, what if you stop the word, therefore you start almost like sucking the oxygen out of the thoughts, and eventually you eradicate the belief. So my method is not about repressing, it's about being mindful. You know what I mean? If there's no money in the bank, like, there's no integrity for you to start saying, I'm rich. But you also don't have to call all your friends and tell them that you're broke either. You know what I mean? Like, you could just shut the fuck up. My commandment number 2 is, thou shalt only talk about your problems to one chosen person. So that's, again, not repression. Like, tell that one best friend. Tell your therapist, and that's it. The problem is when we tell the Uber driver, the neighbor, your cousin, your uncle, your aunt. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and the thing is, like, when we go around complaining about our lives, Sean, we think we're getting it off our chest, but we're not. We're just actually like living out like an emotional addiction. We're almost like doing like a hit of like heroin with our friend. When we come in and we get together and we complain about our lives, and then I'm like, oh God, I hate this, I hate that. And then you're like, oh God. And then I go, Sean, I love talking to you, bro. You get me. And you're like, no, you get me, Jorge. And I'm like, oh, but then guess what happens, Sean? We think like we love each other, right? But no, we just actually did like heroin together. That's why we're feeling good. We just did a big hit. But what's going to happen? In 2 hours from now, your body's going to start craving that again. And then that bad boss is going to show up again as your mother-in-law or your neighbor or whatever. And that's how we keep ourselves addicted to the emotional states that we don't want. So by, injecting the concept or the structure of not complaining, I'm not going to lie, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be like you're going into a detox, right? Your body's going to be like, what are you doing not complaining? This is what you do, like when you get together with Sean. But you go, you know what? I'm not going to do it. And little by little, as detox does to a drug addict, you start having that impulse. And before you know it, Sean, you're not complaining. You're not, one of my chapters is called We Are Not Reporters. Like, we need to stop that addiction of like, here I am in my shitty house with my shitty neighbor and my shitty weather. Stop. We're not reporters. So instead of describing the world as we see it, right? Why don't you describe the world how you want to see it? Why don't we become intentional about what we want?
Our Future Nature is also brought to you today by Authentic Journeys. Authentic Journeys brings together high-performing entrepreneurs, CEOs, leaders, and changemakers with ancient and modern modalities for intense personal growth to deeply align your individual and our collective purposes for positive change in the world. All of our trips are carbon offset, and we only partner with companies that have sustainable practices and credentials. Let us take you on a journey that will enrich your mind, body, and soul while helping the planet and local communities. Check out AuthenticJourneys.com, that's AWETHENTIC Journeys.com, to learn more about our upcoming wellness experiences, travel adventures, and retreats to help you find your all. Yeah, it's almost like the British being fascinated with the bad weather in the country. It almost makes the bad weather worse. It's always raining.
You know what I mean? And I on one of the retreats that I did, I met this amazing Cuban woman. And my dad's side of the family, and my grandfather is Cuban. Obviously Cuba has been under communism for so long, and if you talk to any Cubans and you ask them like, hey, how's it going? Oh, this is shit. The government shit. Everything is shit. But what do you think you're going to experience by declaring something like that constantly? So again, I'm not saying to like say something is not, but we got to stop. We got to lower our narrative, man. We got to start narrating things little by little. But instead of saying, oh, this sucks, I'm like, how about saying, you know what? This is interesting. Like leaving a gap of possibility into everything and everyone. Somebody comes across and they ignore you. How about I'm like, you know what? He was probably in a rush. What about that empathy? We're always like, oh, what an asshole. He didn't say hi. Have you contemplated on the fact that you don't know what's going on in his personal life or how he came genetically wired? So we're so quick to judge. And at the end of the day, it's like we only end up hurting ourselves because we keep judging and making ourselves right about things that we don't want.
Yeah, well said. Why is it that humans, we're attracted to go-getters rather than complainers, yet we in nature, we like to complain all the time. It's a psychological thing.
Oh my gosh. I mean, think about this, Sean. We are the descendants of people that had to do some major surviving, right? Like whether it was the 10,000 BCs or the World War IIs, or like, imagine you and me, you and me are like descendants of all this, but instead of like surviving World War II, we have Amazon Prime. So we're still wired for survival, but we have like, food delivery at our house. We have all these things, but the machine is still, our brains are not built to make us happy. Our brains are built to make us survive. That's what the thing is. So we're almost starting at less than zero. We got to just like work our way to zero. So we're not in that constant fight or flight. So the survival state is almost like our most natural state. You look at little kids, right? Why are little kids scared of the dark? No one taught a little kid to be scared of the dark. But could it be that genetically we know that that's when predators come and eat us? Because our descendants were at some point a saber-toothed tiger ate our great-great-grandfather. So imagine we're like we put this human VR headset on, but we're fighting. We're like dealing with all these genetic predispositions that in your mind you're like, oh my God, well, why am I so crazy over like my neighbor like cutting down that tree? That's not just cutting down the tree. That's like your great-great-grandfather like being murdered somewhere. That, you see what I'm saying? Like the survival mechanism is very real. And that's why we have to, you're a very spiritual guy. We have to really indoctrinate methods to really quiet down that fight or flight, that sympathetic system. So we're just enjoying this life thing a lot more because we don't have to survive anymore. I mean, listen, I'm not speaking obviously for everybody's experiences at all, but we've come to a level in modern science and in our civil laws that things are a lot more peaceful, and we need to start living that way.
We talk about shut the fuck up. We talk about being silent, but what is the balance there of bottling up emotions? Like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to shut the fuck up. But what's the, if I'm holding those emotions in too long, doesn't that create more stress? Isn't that dangerous for the mind?
The commandment number 2 is thou shalt talk to only one person, right? And I've experienced it myself where like I had a situation where I ended a friendship with someone and I understood exactly this person's point of view. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to talk about it. But then I was like, no, I need to talk about it. I'm going to pick one person. So I called 5 people and I was like, whoever calls me back first will get the story. Finally, one person called me back and I told that person, I'm like, hey, you're my chosen one and I'm going to let it rip. And it's beautiful because when you actually preface this and tell somebody they're going to be your person, it's almost like they rise to the occasion. And I also say this at the end of the book, Sean, and I mean it. These commandments, they're suggestions. They don't have to be taken to the letter. So let's say it's not one person, it's 2 or 3 or even 5. Maybe it's a lot better than 20. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to be your own barometer. But I'll tell you something though. I actually, I became friends with someone that has ALS, which is a neurological disease that affects your motor skills. And this friend of mine was convinced that the reason why this was detonated because every time he would have a problem, he would tell so many people. And you got to remember something. If you have a problem, whether it is with your partner or with your boss or your whoever, and you start telling so many people about it, you got to manage those conversations after. So you could have cleared that issue with that person, but then your neighbor, your friend Tom is like, hey, so what happened to that guy that took your money or whatever? You're like, oh, we pieced it out. And they're like, well, really? Because that was messed up. So the more that we tell people about our problems, the more that we have to create systems to like manage them. So we're creating more stress to ourselves. So again, I'm not a trained therapist, or I don't tell people need to do what they need to do, but how about you just pick one person or 2 or 3 and that's it. I know for a fact from my own personal experience that when I have an issue with someone and it's been really intense, I have like this survival thing where I need to tell everybody. But what I've noticed too is that every time you tell somebody an issue, every time you tell somebody your problem, it's not like you solve it. You actually just like move furniture, you stir it up, your body kicks all that cortisol all over again, feels all this, but nothing gets resolved. So it really is up to the person, right? That. But this is from my experience. It's just telling more than one or two people. Your brain doesn't know the difference actually, and this is studied in science. It doesn't know the difference between something that's happening right now or a story that you're telling. You're spiking those chemicals. You might as well be having that drama in person.
You talked about compassion earlier and having more compassion. How do we beef up our compassion as part of the STFU method?
We have to start contemplating on the fact that, Byron Katie, who's another great mentor of mine, she used to have this saying, no two human beings have ever met. It's my story of who I think Sean is and Sean's story of who you think Jorge is. So I have a story of Sean. Your ex-girlfriend has a story of Sean. Your current girlfriend or wife has a story of Sean. And your best friend and your worst enemy, we all have our story of you. So which one of us is right? Maybe we're all right? Or maybe we're just seeing things in you that it's in us. So to contemplate that everything is just your projection, immediately when I meet somebody that I don't like, I actually get excited because I'm like, okay, so let me see my audacity and how I think that you should do life different. You've known you for your whole life, but here I come in the last 5 minutes and I meet you, I'm like, no, you're doing it wrong. So the shut the fuck up method, it's almost like it gets you ready to face your day where you're not as reactive. So if somebody walks in and they ignore you or they scream at you and you're not making it about yourself, So that's how you need to beef up on the compassion. You do the work, you do the internal rewiring. So then when you're in front of that person that's screaming or that's going nuts at Starbucks or that's driving really slow, you take a breath and you go, you know what, this is not personal and this is just an opportunity for me to not be consumed by my environment. When I say the environment is like, we got to have the whole point of this method. And I think the whole, one of the biggest goals we can have as human beings is to have emotional autonomy. When we can't be in this roller coaster of like, people are nice to you, you're happy. People are mean to you, you're sad. People are nice to you, you make money, you're happy. You lose money, you're sad. It's like, we got to get out of this freaking like roller coaster of emotions, right? So how can we like have a solid 90% base and maybe fluctuate 10% up and down, but not really destroy us? Because it's exhausting to live that way. So for me, compassion is to truly know that that person is doing the best that they can. And I don't know what goes on in their mind. I don't know what's going on in their house. And frankly, I don't even know genetically. Maybe they don't even have the toolbox that I have. So how could I expect them to be different?
That's great. That's great perspective. And you mentioned in the book, when you dive deep into the STFU method, that readers might notice a curious shift and might have friends drifting away, or they may drift away from friends. Is that something that you've experienced in your personal life?
I go deep into friendships in the book, because I think that, I've always been that guy. I have a ton of friends. I have a very eclectic group of friends from, the spiritual ones to the partier ones. And I've definitely completed a lot of friendships. And I used to think like, the more the merrier, but the more friendships that we have also, it's the more systems we need to keep in place. So friendships are amazing, man. And we just have a habit that it's almost like, have you noticed like when a friendship ends, you remember it by how it ended instead of really kind of harnessing, like taking a screenshot of what a beautiful relationship that was and really remembering by that. But usually it's, they didn't call you back or they stole your girlfriend and we go around like living that way. And I really make a point and I incentivize people to be like, what if you completed that friendship and now you honor them that they're taking care of somebody else and you're taking care of other people. And to be honest, you have to let go of friendships because in this 3D world of only a certain amount of hours that we have, how are you going to make room for new people if you don't complete chapters with old people, right? And I think it's amazing if people have 30-year-old friendships but it's also beautiful if you complete them and they don't have to be 30 years. So I'm a big fan of really taking the initiative to not remember things by how they ended, but how take a really great screenshot on how good it was. I had a friend that took his life 3 years ago, and he left me a suicide note, and he actually said this, and I'll always carry it with me. He said, please remember us by the good times and not how it ended. So I make a point to really remember all my friendships, regardless of how it ended, by the good times that we had.
I mean, that's very noble and a great practice, but very hard, as we all know.
Well, guess what, Sean? If you say that it's really hard, you will experience it that way. So I want you to start using the STFU method now. Be like, yeah, seriously. Wait, listen, when you say something's hard, that's powerful, man. When you say something's hard, you just cemented it. Boom, hard. How about saying it could be tricky? How about we start using the power of language that we have access to? Sorry to pick on you, but
no,
I even talk about it in the book. The hard with the hard word. Go after you for that one.
This is the STFU method in real time. You're absolutely right. It's all about the words we use, because at the end of the day, it's all about the story we have, the narrative we tell ourselves, really, isn't it?
Words. We gotta like rewire our neural path and create neural path. Do you realize, Sean, that the brain is so effective? The brain is like the ultimate AI machine. The brain recycles 70,000 thoughts a day because it knows that if it doesn't acquire new thoughts, it's gonna use less fuel. So our brains are wired to keep repeating these survival words like it's hard, it's tough out there, the recession. Our brains love it because that's what survival does. Survival keeps you like, you better be careful out there because shit's gonna hit, the shoe's gonna drop. But we've come to such a powerful place where like spirituality and science are finally meeting. We're understanding the brain states, and now energy and stuff is not just like chakras, right? We're talking about energy centers. So it's like, what an exciting time to be alive, because we can really just like marinate and go deep into science and spirituality, which is now merging. And we have to bring a rigor to how we talk. We have to transform and speak clean now.
Now, you talk about the law of attraction, and you're a big believer in that, and it sort of ties into this concept of, you are what you put out, and what you put out comes back to you. Do you really believe in the law of manifestation, and do you manifest?
All we really have is the eternal now, right? We call things the future and we call it the past, but in reality, it's now. Whether we get more cars or more women or more money, what are we going to have when we get all those things? More now time. So now is 10 minutes from now, or now is 10 years from now. So I'm not such a fan of like instant manifestation, because in reality, instant doesn't exist. Time is a construct that we created to like say, all right, Sean, we're going to meet in 2 weeks at this time. But in reality, we're just going from now to now to now to now to now. So do I have amazing things that I want to manifest? Yes, I have my list. I have my things, but I don't know how to. They're just not that important anymore. You know what's important to me? The now moment, having this conversation with you. And after that, it'll be dinner with a friend. And after that, it'll be whatever it is. It'll be stuck in traffic. It'll be my airline telling me that there's a 2-hour delay. It'll be me getting stuck in a hotel room. And I got to tell you, I'm getting so much more pleasure now these days, not from getting what I want, but from seeing who I am when I don't get what I want. That when I go to bed at night and I pat myself in the back and I'm like, can you believe that they canceled my flight and I'm here in this 1-star hotel and I don't care? That's when literally I've had moments like that, Sean, that have brought tears to my eyes, because I'm no longer a victim. I'm no longer a slave of first class ticket. Yeah, ooh, sad coach in the back with the chickens. Like, no, I'm not. My happiness and my frustration, I'm not a puppet anymore. I get to have autonomy. So when I overcome my environment, meaning when I don't get that thing that I wanted, when I get a no, but it feels like a yes, and there's like an innate trust that it's not time yet, right? Whether it is getting that huge interview about my book or getting all this, but they tell me nope, then it's oh God, it's like I'm feeling so much more joy. I can still feel that little pain, right? Like little, like I didn't get it. But then it goes away. And the more that you do this work and you manage how you talk and you don't say things like it's hard, the more that, oh man, things are just it's gonna feel like like a pinch instead of like that hour, 2 days, or like, this fire, like almost like an avalanche effect on like, oh, this is why this is not working because it never works. And like you stop it right there. You nip it in the bud. And that's how life is. That's how life feels for me. And I know that's how life feels when you really take this on.
You don't think too much about the future, or you don't get too attached to the outcome.
No.
But obviously you want a better outcome, like you want a better future. Like if this book does well, what do you want for your life now? Is it like you're going to give up your day job? You're going to focus on, are you going to be the next Dr. Joe Dispenza? What's your sort of vision board?
Right now, this is my day job. I'm getting, I had a friend write me on Instagram today saying that it's blowing his mind and he's feeling so much love for himself. And I'm just enjoying this, right? Do I want to be like a Tony or Joe? I don't know. Let's see. I'm open to it, but I'm certainly not living in the lie of like, oh, I'm not going to stop until I get to be like Joe, because I don't even know how Joe feels when the lights are off and it's just him in his hotel room. You know what I'm saying? It's like all these things that we think we want, we don't really know what these experiences. And granted, I love Joe. I spent so much time with him. Actually, on the last retreat, he told me that, he said the sweetest thing. He's like, I'm glad we've gone so much time to get to know each other. Like he's like my favorite person, but I still don't know what happens when the lights are off, for anybody for that matter. So all I can say is that I'm following my path. I'm enjoying this process, and I'm going to keep going as long as I can.
Going back to this idea of the quantum entanglement and the observer effect. So this idea that, a photon energy will become a wave, or when you observe it, and it will go back again if you don't observe it, or it will change its state. Do you believe then in the simulation theory, really, that we are all in some sort of matrix simulation, and it's basically determined by how you think, essentially, and how it's a game that you're sort of playing, and essentially what you're saying is you could rewrite the rules of the game.
Well, let me give you my answer, Sean. This is chapter 25. We are a simulation.
Okay.
Well,
so we can get to chapter 25.
And by the way, a little shout out on the book right here. I mean, I have my cheat sheet. We're like, oh my gosh. No, so I am such a believer, Sean, that this is 100% a simulation. I'll give you, when I was little, I used to love going to the movies and seeing, I remember I saw Batman 6 times by myself. And I remember that I would watch the screen and I would see the projector in the back. And I would always be like, wait, how can that be coming from the back when you can't see it in the air, right? But these are distorted light particles that when they hit matter, which is the wall, then it gets projected. 100%. I believe that we are projected from somewhere that we can't see it. And our projection is actually our human bodies. So the whole thing about meditation and going into the field, it's like, instead of, so let's say your life is the projected wall, right? It's the Sean show. It's the Sean, the action figure Sean. And it's like, your paycheck, and you force it and force it and like force the outcome, move it around, manipulate, then you get the bigger pay. Now the spot on the wall is my partner. She's got to do the laundry better, whatever it is. Then my parents, my neighbor. So we spend all of our lives going from matter to matter, like cleaning up the wall, right? The projected wall. When in reality, all we had to do is clean the projector, and then they all get clear, right? And that's how I feel with me. It's like, rather than matter to matter forcing outcomes, why don't I just let it go and surrender? And that's why, it does seem ironic, right? But that the less that you want something, the easier that it comes. The more that we want something that from that scarcity place, I gotta make it, I gotta be the new Joe Dispenza, I gotta be the next Tony. Yeah, you might get there, right? Because you're gonna force and manipulate and push and throw this one under the bus and stuff. But then then you're gonna get there, and you just taught yourself that if you suffer enough, you're gonna get what you want. And I don't want to get what I want by suffering. I'll work hard, man. I love working hard. but I gotta enjoy the work. I'm not gonna work my ass off so that I can get the vacation. No, I'm gonna work my ass off and enjoy the work. And then the vacation will just come, but the vacation will feel just as good as all that hard work. If I'm really using the energy and not describing things as hard and this is a nightmare. And you see what I'm saying? It's like, fuck the vacation, fuck it. Like, your life is the vacation right now. How can we start treating this thing like a vacation? How can we be stuck in traffic and enjoying the fact that we can breathe and it's not moving, but it's all okay, right? How can we rewire ourselves to not wait until it's like, let me work so hard until I get there? That there is never going to fulfill you. The mind will recalibrate and be like, no, wait, no, I didn't say I wanted the hot girl. I meant the hot girl that's not an alcoholic. I didn't know. I didn't want the alcoholic hot girl. And then like, until when is when? The whole thing is that it's now. Life is paradise now. And if you don't think life is paradise now, then you need to go serve the homeless, and you need to like do something that reminds you, that lets you know right now that you're living your best life right now. And once you really get that, then energetically, it's just going to get better and better.
I mean, this whole, being in the present, being in the now, it's great if you're at the top of the Maslow's, hierarchy of needs when you have safety and food. But, if you are in a compromised situation where, let's say, you are getting bombed on in a war zone, or you are homeless, how does this translate into, their situation? Of course, their now is not so great.
Sean, will never know what they feel like. And I'll tell you, so my grandmother, she escaped the Civil War in Spain, and she was a refugee that she did the whole thing. Then finally she met my grandfather, who was a really wealthy guy. My uncle went to boarding school, blah, blah, blah. Dude, that woman never talked about anything else than that 1 year where she escaped the war when she was 11. And she would talk about how they blew up her school, but all of a sudden, right before they blew up the cafeteria, she had like a panic attack, and she ran out, and all the little kids ran behind her. And the minute that they all ran out, they blew up the building. So she inadvertently saved like 100 kids. And no matter how many, like I said, lived in Europe, lived in Central Park West, she never talked about those things. She always talked about the year that she was at war and how meaningful it was. I'm just giving you that as an example of like, we don't know how people feel, even in those scarcity and those tight situations in life. I've been to India, and I'll never forget that I've never seen happier people in my life. And it was such a I don't know if that's happened to you, when you do all these travels, and it's like in America, we got credit cards and we have cars and we have AC, but there's something to be said about all those material things. They don't really hit the spot as much as we think they do. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. And it's often the case that people with less are happier. And if you look at all the happiness indexes of major developed countries, and we're more prosperous materialistically than we've ever been, but the happiness index is plummeting across the Western world. So it's a direct, inverse of the more you have, the less happy we're getting. It's bizarre. So yeah, we've got our yardstick wrong. The measure of progress in society is not right. And that's the problem with measuring economic success with GDP. Finally, so what advice would you give to people who can't shut up? Like they read your book and they're like, God, I just want to complain, or I want to say it's hard. Is there a way of checking yourself or auditing yourself?
Listen, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. You know what I mean? Listen, so this work, you read this whole book, and you're gonna make a crack in the wall. Okay? And here's what happens. I've done real estate investing a lot in my life. When there's a crack in the wall, Sean, it's just gonna get bigger and bigger. It might get bigger really fast, or it might go slow. This is it's like you're walking down the street, man, and you see a snake and you freak out. But then you look closer and you see that it's a rope. Try to make that thing a snake again. Try it. But summon your inner Meryl Streep. It'll never happen again. So once you really read this book and you understand the principles, you could still listen. You'll still gossip. I still gossip here and there. In fact, I have more fun with it now. I always go like, all right, I'm going against my book, but I'm going to say it. But guess what? Maybe I'm gossiping like 100 times less than what I used to. And that will make a difference in the quality of my life. So I'm not saying like, you can't say it's hard anymore, but once you're aware, man, you can never go back. You can never go back. So that's why I say, have compassion with yourself. Don't take life too seriously. We're only passing by, man. Like, it's not the end of the world. And the more compassion you have like this with yourself, the more you're going to have it with others.
Yeah, I love that. And then just to finish off, presumably if you're from Venezuela, you grew up as in a religious faith of some sort?
I grew up Catholic. We weren't like crazy. Crazy. We weren't super religious, but my background is Catholicism.
What do you think, organized religion has to say about your theories and practices?
Listen, I think organized religion is great if you're into organized religion. I think my work is great. And if you're into my work, I think belief systems are so beautiful. And if someone were to turn around and tell me, I think you're full of shit, I would say 100%. Like, there's no right or wrong. Like, everybody needs to follow their integrity, whether you're a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian, we're all doing it the right way. I'm just telling you what works for me. If you're into it, great. If you're not, 100%. So I hope I hope they're okay with it, but if they're not, I'm okay with that too.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jorge. I think that's a great time to wrap it up. We've covered a lot. For anyone who's interested in the STFU method, make sure you get the book on Amazon. And can't wait to hear more about your journey, Jorge. And I'm also going to be implementing the top commandments of the STFU method starting today. So it's not hard. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be easy.
It's gonna be easy. It's gonna be an adventure. It's an adventure. Life is an adventure. We need to talk about it that way.
Absolutely. I love that. Beautiful. Thank you, Jorge. And thanks for your time. And I'll see you soon. Thank you for tuning in to Our Future Nature. Please remember to like and subscribe to keep up with the latest episodes. And if you enjoyed the podcast, it'd be really helpful if you could take a few minutes to leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please also follow us on Instagram and Threads at Our Future Nature Pod for behind the scenes and additional resources, or on X at OFN_podcast. That's OFN_podcast. You can find our social media pages on the podcast episode description. You can also follow me at Lee-Davies if you want to be updated on the work that I do in green entrepreneurship, advocacy, and conservation. And finally, Our Future Nature is powered by the team at Authentic Studio. Thanks everyone, and see you next time.